I'm Larry Casilla here with Capital One Auto Navigator. Although buying or leasing a brand new car implies it's gonna look absolutely fantastic when you pick it up, that's not always the case. Today, I'm gonna show you the step-by-step process for properly washing, claying, polishing, and even protecting your brand new car. Okay, for step one, we're gonna properly wash the vehicle. Now, most people confuse dish soap with car soap. There is a massive difference between the two. Right off the bat, dish soap is designed to emulsify fats and lipids. In other words, the food that we eat that gets stuck to the plate, we need to remove that and then have it clean and we can use it again. The difference between that and car soap is it doesn't do that. In other words, this isn't designed to remove lipids. Now, lipids are another way of saying waxes or sealants or protectants that we put on our car. We want to keep it there. Car soaps do not remove that. So there is a massive difference between the two of them. Two different soaps for two different jobs. Okay, now that we got the paint bucket all set, we're now gonna work on the wheel bucket. Now, the point being here is we have two separate buckets, one for the paint and one for the wheels. Why do we do that? The reason we do that is you can see here, there is brake dust absolutely everywhere on every single car. What that is tiny little metal shards that are released when you compress the brake against the rotor. And what happens is if you were to clean that, let's say with your paint towel, you come in here, you clean the wheel, and then come up and wash the paint, you are going to scratch it. Why? Because those metal shards are attached to the microfiber towel or your wash mitt, and you're basically just scratching your car. So the idea here is if you separate both buckets, you avoid cross-contamination. So in this particular one, we're gonna keep this just for wheels. Some of the tools we're gonna use, this is a wheel woolly that gets behind the rim. This is another smaller wheel woolly that gets into the calipers. If you have very intricate calipers, this is a mini woolly, very cute and very effective. And then we have our lug nut brush. You can see two tiers, very specific to get behind into the lug nuts and the caliper as well. And in this case, we're using a specific pH soap designed for wheels itself. So we have paint soap and we have wheel soap. This is a lower pH, or this is a bit higher pH. Why are we using lower? Because a more acidic product is gonna be better at actually chewing up a lot of the brake dust, so it's a more effective cleaner. For the first step in washing your car, we focus on the wheels for a couple of reasons. The first one is you don't want to soak the entire car down. Why? Because if the car is outside and it's warm, the water is going to evaporate and you could potentially create water spots. So we don't want to do that. If you're indoors, then maybe you can switch this up. For the most part, I just encourage people to work the wheels. The first thing you want to do here is rinse everything down because you don't want to work on hot or warm wheels. The cleaners are going to evaporate much faster, and they are in fact much stronger when they evaporate faster than they're supposed to. So first step here, rinse everything down. Now when I'm rinsing things down, very quick, I do the tire, the rim, and the wheel well as well. Next, I come in with a wheel cleaner. There's multiple options here. You can go with acid all the way down to base. So this is more of a basic cleaner. We don't want to use a ton of strong acid here because a lot of times it can etch the clear coated wheel here. The wheel, interestingly enough, is also painted just like your paint. So you wouldn't want to put acid on your paint. You don't necessarily want to put stronger acids on your wheel either. So in this case, we're using a strong base. With the water that's already on there and the fact that this is cool, I add a few squirts, including the caliper if you have painted calipers like this one, and let it sit for a second as you go back in your bucket. Next, we use the wheel woolly. Wheel woolly, you start at about 12 o'clock and go on the back side of the rim. And you want to work one way or the other so that you can use gravity to your advantage. As I'm going in, notice I'm spinning and pulling in and out, and that's to get fresh material here, in this case microfiber, and you're not grinding old stuff around. So you get to about 6 o'clock down here. I go back in, redunk, get some fresh cleaner, and then as you can see, I can't go in all the way here because the caliper's there. So I'm gonna skip the caliper, go behind the bottom. Now I'm at about 5 o'clock, and once again, at 6 o'clock. So I've pretty much hit all the back of the rim except around the caliper because it's very tight between the caliper and the inside of the rim. So what I'll do is I'll take a smaller one, which is a wheel woolly, and this one fits. Sometimes it becomes so close that it doesn't fit, and then we have to use the mini Woolly. So now I can reach between the caliper and the backside of the rim. So now everything back there is perfectly clean. Next, I will go in and use the wheel brush, the lug nut brush. You can see it's 2 tiers. It's designed so that it can get inside the lug nuts and agitate all the dirt that's trapped in there. And then you'll see it falls right out. And then you can go into the tight spots. Every set of rims have, little unique pockets. Like this one here is perfect for this brush. But more importantly, you can see around the air fill area, those tend to be a harder place to agitate the dirt. What happens is if you don't get that on a regular basis, it just accumulates. And when the wheel heats up and cools down, it creates this sort of vacuum effect on the brake dust where it just becomes more and more embedded in the wheels. And everybody's seen wheels and rims on the street that have so much brake dust that you just can't clean them because they just sort of bake themselves into the clear coat of the wheel. So doing this on a regular basis is key. So once I get all the little tight spots, then I can take this, extend it, go in and clean the caliper as well. And the idea is just to agitate it enough. And what's interesting is this is made out of very soft plastic, so you're not doing any damage to it. There's no metal on these brushes at all. Then finally, I go back in and I'll use a towel. And this towel, again, is specific. In my case, I only use blue towels for the wheels. This will never touch the paint because we don't want to cross-contaminate or use any of the brake dust that's now trapped in this towel on the paint because it will scratch. So now what I'm doing is I'm going behind the calipers. I did inside the rim, and now I'm doing behind the spokes themselves. You can see my hand goes in like this and goes around with the towel. So the hand goes in, and now I'm getting the back side of the rims. Again, to avoid that from building up, and then at some point, a year or two in, it's just impossible to remove. All right, so now that we got that, so the next step is to focus on the rubber. Now we have special brushes that are very stiff. Get in there to agitate brand new rubber. You can see a lot of times they turn brown because they just don't, even if they're new, they haven't been scrubbed yet. So we do that all the way around. You can see it's turning a little brown there. And the very last step, you take your wheel Woolly that you used in the first step and you clean the wheel well. Back and forth and spinning at the same time. Now, you are good to go. And the idea is you're gonna work one wheel at a time from the start all the way to the end, which is to power wash everything. You do not want to let any chemical, any soap, anything dry on the wheel, especially if it's warm, if you just drove the car or you're just getting back from a trip. So we do 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we'll start the paint. Now that the paint and the wheels have been properly cleaned, at this point we can clay the paint. Now what happens is most people think that you can wash your car and then every single time you wash your car you have to clay your paint. You don't need to do that, but in this case, because it's a brand new car, a lot of times these are transported via boats, via railways, they sit outside and they just collect a lot of contamination. One way to find out if your car or your paint needs to be clayed is to take your hand, it's even better if you have a glove on, and rub it against the paint. And if you can feel little bumps, sort of like little pimples in the paint, and certainly if you can hear it, can you hear that right now? That's contamination. What happens is the contamination sticks to the paint and then sticks up, and as your glove wipes over it, it makes that noise. So you want your paint to be really, really smooth before you protect it. So if you do need to clay it, then you should clay it, but you should not clay your paint if it doesn't require it. It's sort of like going to the emergency room because it's Tuesday. You don't need to go if it's Tuesday. You need to go if you have some damage to yourself or whatever. In this case, if there's damage to the paint, you do need to clay it. What happens is they come in little squares like this. This one's in the bag, this one is out. You take this and you split it into 2 and you just pull it like a little patty and you flatten it out like a hamburger. Now the trick is, if you notice, we haven't dried the paint yet. And the reason we're doing that is we want to add lubrication. This works with lubrication and a little bit of downward pressure. So what's going to happen is, just like the Biore strips that you put on your nose, and you peel it off and the blackheads peel off, that's the same kind of thing that's going on with the paint. So what we do is take the same wash mitt that we had before, we put it in our left hand for a righty, we squeeze it and see all the lubrication coming out. Now we're gonna take our hand on the patty, 3 fingers, and you move back and forth quickly. I'm not putting a lot of downward pressure, but I am using a lot of friction here. And what's happening is you can actually hear it picking up the contamination, and then when I go back over the area, you can't hear it anymore. And so that means it's being picked up or sort of pulled out of the paint. Now, the reason you want to do that is when we go into polish or we do our wax afterwards and you have contamination on it, it's not going to allow it to stick properly. So that took about 20 seconds or so. And you can see there's a few little dots in here, nothing horrible, there's a few little lines here and there. The worse the paint, the more the spots you're going to see. This will start to turn black. So at this point, you can hear, look, there's no sound of me wiping my hand back and forth. That means all the contamination has been removed. So what we do is we take this and we fold it and we re-knead it. Just like this with your hands, and you create another hamburger shape, kind of like that, nice and flat, enough to get 3 fingers on. And then if you look at it, there's no contamination on it, and we can move to the next section. So a lot of people think that you have to clay the car all the time. That's false. A lot of people think that you have to clay it and it takes forever, like hours and hours and hours to it. That's also false. The third thing that's a misconception with clay is it does not remove scratches. In fact, this might in fact put scratches in your paint. So you want to avoid this if you have to. You don't just clay your paint because you're washing your car. You only clay your paint if it's absolutely necessary. With the paint now super smooth because we clayed it, it's still wet, so we're gonna have to dry it. Now, same concept as washing the paint with lots of lubrication with multiple buckets and lots of wash mitts and that kind of thing. Now we have to do the same kind of concept with drying. The idea is to dry with a lubricant. In this case, I'm using a paint lubricant or a paint moisturizer. You spray it on a damp microfiber towel, and then during the drying process, you use a folded microfiber towel back and forth and scoop up the water. Now the idea here is you're not using squeegees or old chamois. The reason why old chamois are in fact very old and contain lots of contamination, which is just like using sandpaper. So if I used an old chamois, I'd be wiping it, it'd be scratching the paint right now. On the flip side, a microfiber towel, one that is freshly laundered, is picking up any contamination that I may have missed during the wash process. So it's sort of like the second step of washing is actually drying. So with this here, you can see it's still a little bit damp. It's going to evaporate and we're good to go. Reapply as you go through. I'll do this section over here. And now as I wipe back and forth both the windows and the glass, the towel becomes full. I'll flip it over, wring it out. Okay. Refold the towel. Add a little bit more lubrication. You can see it's very viscous, it's very thick. That's the lubricant. And go back in and dry and protect your paint. So we don't want to use squeegees because squeegees potentially scratch the paint as they're going across. If there's anything like dirt or dust that's sort of settled on the car in between when you finished power washing the car from when you actually dry it, it can roll around like a rock and basically re-scratch the paint, defeating the purpose of doing a proper wash with multiple buckets and lots of lubrication. So you have to start with lots of lubrication and end the wash with lots of lubrication. Now at this point, the paint is cleaned and clayed, and in preparation of putting a protectant on the paint, we do want to do a bit of polishing. Now you can do this by hand or machine, but I'm going to show you how to do it by hand today. So you're going to take exfoliate polish, put it on a microfiber pad. Take that pad, work small sections, probably 2 by 2 sections, up and down, back and forth. I try to avoid circles if possible. And what this is going to do is it's going to rejuvenate the finish and make it ready to accept the protection. In this case, you can wax it, you can seal it, but for this particular car, we are going to put a coating on, which we're going to talk about in just a second. And you can see it'll start to dry. Now, after it's been applied to about half a section, so half a hood or half a door, you go in with a microfiber towel and you can remove it very easily. And you can see there's way more depth and shine. Now, the reason that we're not using circles like this, we're using straight lines is if there was to get a little bit of a rock or maybe some dust or something that is a bit of abrasive, same thing when we're applying it by hand in the first place with the polish. If you use a circular motion and create circles, it's actually 10 times harder to remove a circle than a straight line. The reason why is it's 360-degree actual scratch. That means I have to move the machine in a certain way to be able to blend that. So if it's just one straight line, it's much easier. I can go back and forth over it without having to move the machine in a particular way. So the moral of the story is if you use circles like this and you make a mistake, it's much harder to get that mistake out from a professional detailing perspective. So it's just easier to err on the side of caution and just use straight lines if possible. When it comes to protecting your paint, you have a couple of different options. Here we have wax, sealants, and coatings. What's the difference? When we're working with wax, very easy to use. It lasts about 3 to 6 months and incredibly shiny. We're talking about the middle of the road here. That's skin, that is a sealant. Sealants are designed in a chemical lab to be much stronger. So they last about 6 to 9 months, easy to put on and easy to take off, kind of no consequences. Now, when we go to the strong one here, this is coating. All the rage these days, when you apply coating to paint, it lasts anywhere from 1 to 2 years. However, you do need to wear masks, goggles, because this chemical is on the stronger side because it's so chemically resistant. At the same time, if you make a mistake here, what we call high spots, you will need to sand or polish it off to remove it. So it's a little bit more complicated. However, it lasts much longer. But for this car, we're gonna be using sealant, and we'll go over the step-by-step process on how to use that right now. So one thing to keep in mind when you're applying waxes, sealants, and coatings is to make sure that one, you're out of the sun, you're out of the wind, you're out of the rain, obviously, but number two, you wanna make sure that the panel is not too hot. The reason why is you can get premature curing, and if that happens, it'll stick to the paint and it becomes very difficult to remove. So make sure that the paint, the surface of the paint, the vehicle itself is out of direct sunlight and cool to the touch before you apply any protection. Owning a brand new vehicle is incredibly exciting, and keeping it looking as new as possible for as long as possible is the goal. Washing and drying properly, claying if needed, then polishing before you protect it will keep your car looking shiny and smooth for the life of the car.